Hi, I'm Roxy, and today I'm going to be looking at Corel Painter 2023, what's new, and the big question, is it worth actually upgrading? And I can tell you right now, it's not a yes or no answer. It depends on how you actually use the software. So some of you will be thrilled, and some of you will be rather underwhelmed. But to show you what I mean, let's dive straight into the new functionality. There's two new technologies, and the first one is color selection brushes. The color selection brush is a brand new way of selecting different areas of your painting based on color. It's like the magic wand tool, but on the magic wand tool, what you'd be doing is you'd be like kind of multi-selecting areas based on the color. But with the color selection brush, you just paint instead of multi-click. So what you're going to do is you're going to come over here to selection brushes, grab one of the brushes. Ordinarily, it's just a selection brush. So you paint an area and that becomes a selection. But to turn it into a color selection brush, you're going to head over to this panel, color selection. You can find that in Window, Brush Control Panels, Brush Media, Color Selection. And you want to tick this on here, Enable Color Selection. The other place you can find it is this yin-yang symbol over here. You'll see it's connected to that, so I just switched it off and I can switch it on again. So to specify what color you want to select, you don't have to eyedrop or punch in the color you want. You just position the brush cursor ghost over the area of the color that you want, and it's going to select right in the middle. So let's try and aim for that orange, and as soon as you click, you see I missed the orange. Just Control D to deselect, shift it over, there we go, it's on the orange. It's going to be selecting that darker orange, and now I just paint. Doesn't look like it's doing much, but it's busy selecting all of this. And as long as I don't lift my stylus from the canvas, it's going to keep selecting. So I'm painting all over, and as soon as I lift my stylus, you'll see it's selected all of those orange dots. To grow the selection, you basically do the same thing. Position the cursor over something and paint, 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 and there you go, you see it's added to the selection. So let's just grab another color and do a paint over. You can see it's changed that darker orange to this pink color. Now if you're finding that it's not really selecting well and not enough surrounding colors and stuff like that, you can play with the tolerance. Let me just select the selection tool again, selection brush. You can see you can play with the tolerance over here. Also, if you head up to the other yin-yang icon, it's the same thing over here, color tolerance and brightness tolerance. And you pretty much always want to have smooth, jagged edges selected, because without which it ends up looking even more pixelated than what you see here. So just a little bug I want to point out. If you tick or untick, whatever the case may be, if you use this checkbox and then immediately try to pan using a space bar and click and drag, it won't let you. It just keeps defaulting back. It keeps toggling this on and off instead of allowing you to pan. So you got to basically click there, maybe click away somewhere else, and then you can pan the canvas. Corel Painter are aware of that bug. So hopefully they fix it soon. So bug aside, it is a useful functionality, maybe. I mean, if you use the magic wand a lot, then probably this will be an upgrade to your workflow. For me personally, I don't use the magic wand tool, and I don't have the patience to fiddle around with the tolerance to get the exact selection I want. So I'd probably just paint over it. So for me, this would not be a draw card to upgrading. But it is kind of cool, and I'm sure that there are plenty of people who will be psyched out about this. The other major technology they've added this version is fluid paint. And incidentally, I painted this character using fluid paint technology back when version 23 was in beta, and I have to say it was a pleasure to use. Basically, fluid paint is another way to control opacity. You know, like how Photoshop has two ways. It has opacity and flow. PaintStorm Studio has opacity and transparency. And now Painter also has two ways. It has opacity and fluid paint. In all of these instances, it's not a matter of choosing one technology or the other because they tend to work better together. Let me give you a quick demo, but first, actually, let me show you where to find this. So fluid paint, it's a panel. You can access it from Window, Brush Control Panels, Brush Media, and Fluid Paint. Now I'm just going to grab Roxy Essential Painting Brushes. This is a brush pack that I have for free on Gumroad. Go ahead and grab it. And if you've already grabbed it previously, go ahead and grab another copy because I've updated most of these brushes to use fluid paint technology. So I'm just going to grab this first one and untick fluid paint. So draw a squiggle, and then I'm going to tick fluid paint and do another squiggle. Now you'll see how much more range I have with fluid paint, particularly in the lighter opacities. It's really picking up the soft touches, which is great because I have a soft touch. And in the past, Painter hasn't really respected that as much as other painting programs, even with setting brush calibration. So this gives me a wider range, and it's just magic. It feels so much better than previous versions. It feels good to just be able to build up from nothing into something. Now the other thing that we can do here is if we turn off paint layering, and I'll tell you why in a bit, and then we can cap fluid opacity at not 100%. Then if we paint, you'll see how it's really even if we lift the stylus and paint over, it just never gets to full opacity. So this is particularly nice, I'd imagine, for working in a bit of atmospheric perspective, or painting, a nice glaze of color over something where you want to preserve the paint strokes underneath. Could be nice for things like fog and glows and stuff like that. So definitely useful. It's a nice even glazer. Now the reason why we had to turn off paint layering is because paint layering, each time you lift up the stylus and paint again, it adds another layer of paint. It's kind of like virtual layers. It's like as if you would add a layer paint, it's going to build up that opacity. So paint layering will do that. So each successive stroke will build up to full opacity. So obviously that conflicts with what we were trying to do there. Paint layering is usually off by default, but I like to keep it on my brushes because it just feels more natural to be able to build up opacity while going over the same spot again and again. Now you'll see in the panel you've got this accumulation, and that is kind of a lightweight version of paint layering. It doesn't work quite as well, but it does accumulate paint with each stroke, and that I would say would be good for if you're using a hybrid paint blender brush, because paint layering doesn't work with blending. So if you're using a blender brush or a hybrid brush, then I guess you could make accumulation work for you, but otherwise you can pretty much ignore that. I always just keep fluid opacity at 100%, and just go with that, and it seems to work really well. The other thing worth noting is how fluid paint behaves with textures. So just going to switch to Roxy texture series. This is another one of my paint packs. It's not free, but I think it's like $2 if I recall. I'll put a link in the description as well. I'm going to just grab this brush, and the nice thing about this version is it comes with a paper pack, and they're all very nice, but this one in particular, Standard Artist Canvas, is just gorgeous. Let me just zoom in so you can see that grain. See that? Now, with fill-in paper grain, as I go over the same spot, it's slowly going to build up to full opacity, or if I press hard, it's going to fill in the grain with full opacity. But if I uncheck that, then I can go over the same spot again and again, and you'll see it maintains the grain. Even if I press hard, okay, if I press hard, it still does it. But, so you've got a greater chance of maintaining that grain, if that's the look you're going for. Now, besides the paper library, it does also come with 2 paintbrush sets that use fluid technology, so I'm going to go through each of these quickly just to showcase them. I'm just going to have to press reset on each one because I have gone through these before and made adjustments. So I want to show you how they are at default. The first one is Shape Builder, and this has got opacity control. It goes into more opaque as you press harder. It's kind of got on the oblique. Was it the oblique? Over here you see that's thinner than over there, and that kind of gives it a nice kind of ribbon quality. You can kind of picture that ribbon curling around. But yeah, it's quite a streaky brush, so it works well if you're trying to go for that painterly effect. It's quite pleasant to use. Blocky is the next brush, and this has got, see, it's got quite a streak to it, which makes it ideal, I think, for hair. Kind of see those individual strands without putting in the work of painting them in. So also, you know, a painterly kind of brush, quite attractive, and feels good to use. Next one is Soft. Now, Soft is, as the name implies, really nice for glows and things like that. If I grab a lighter color here, just make the brush a little smaller. The glow usually has a brighter center. Make it big again. Grab a yellow. The brush resizing has improved a little bit in this version of Painter. It's still not 100% there. There's kind of a bug where after you resize the brush, the first stroke that you use doesn't show up. But thereafter, it works. So it is faster than before, but that little bug of that first stroke is a bit of a pain in the ass. But Corel Painter does know about it. It has been reported multiple times. So the soft brush, that works well. The hard brush is very similar to my round brush that I've got in my Essential Brushpack, except I think mine's a little better. But yeah, it works well. Nice simple brush all rounder. Then we've got the pastel brush. This is it's a nice brush, but it requires calibration because I feel like I have to press really hard to get anywhere. So if we just make the pressure power a little bit lower, there we go. That's better. Now I don't have to wear out my tablet and stylus nib. Feels really good. Looks really good. Really gorgeous brush, and can't complain. But it does have some blending, which I don't particularly like. You'll notice that as soon as you start seeing this yellow tinge to brushes, it means that there's some blending on it. If you don't want the blending, what you do is you'd crank up the resaturation amount and turn down the bleed, and then there's no blending. This is a kind of a subtle blender. It's not as bad as some of them that you'll see later on. So charcoal brush. Okay, in this color it looks exceedingly ugly, but if you pick black, it does actually have a charcoal-esque look about it. Also, I think it's standing to do with some calibration, so you don't have to press so hard. But yeah, you can definitely create charcoal-y looking stuff with this. So I think it's a good name for the brush. Hatch. Now this one is, in my opinion, a straight up novelty brush. I can't imagine really using this in any serious capacity. It's such a distinctive look about it that, you know, it's going to create a style in your painting, and a style should come from you, not from a brush, in my opinion. But there may be instances where, you know, you can do something with this brush. It is an aggressive blender as well, so you know, it's not a brush that you're going to be using every day, but you might find occasion where some part of your painting, you know, looks good with it. It is fun to use, I'll give it that, but a bit of a novelty. Broken Edge, also a novelty brush. I think originally it's quite small. Yeah, I did increase the size a bit. So it reminds me of like crumpled up paper. And I feel like this is less of a novelty brush than the previous one, because I think you could probably use it for maybe foliage, or at least the start of foliage. Kind of get you halfway there, and then you grab another brush and kind of refine it. So it has potential. Certainly fun to play with. Next one we've got is Pile of Blocks. This one is the harder you press, the bigger it gets. It's also a bit crazy looking. Kind of reminds me of, like, you know, when you're frying up some egg rice and it sticks to the pan. It's got that kind of look about it. So probably could also be useful in terms of like starting foliage, but then, you know, going in with another brush and fixing it up. But kind of a novelty brush as well. Now, oil sculpt. This feels real nice. It does have a smeary quality about it. Feels real nice to play with. but as you can see, it's quite an aggressive blender. You may or may not like that, and does tend to bring in some, like, where does it get this green from? You know, it's bringing in some unpredictability, which I don't care for in a brush. I like to be in control. I'm a control freak, at least with brushes. So what's this one? This was Grain Painter. Okay. This one also feels real nice, and I think the reason why I had it small is because it's got kind of like a pencilish look to it, doesn't it? And I think it could stand to have some brush calibration. There we go. Now I don't have to wear out my nib. But yeah, it's a great brush. Really enjoy this one. Wispy Flow Map. Okay, so this one, I won't say it's ugly, but it's certainly a novelty brush. And I think it gives a very distinct look. I think if you use this, your painting probably end up looking like an impressionist piece. So if that's the look you're going for, then cool. But if not, yeah, I don't think it's a highly practical brush. Move on to Paint and Blend. Now, everything in this category has some element of blending, and I would probably go out of my way to remove all of that blending so that I can control it better. But, you know, if you like that kind of thing, then that's great. So this one feels really nice. It's got a nice painterly look to it. And of course, it is a blender, an aggressive one at that, because as you can see, as soon as I go into the white, lose that orange color. But it's nice, I enjoy it. Next one is Flat Bristle. This one, if you paint horizontally, it's thin, and if you paint vertically, it's fat. So it also has that kind of ribbon quality. If you don't like that, just head on over to Angle, change it from bearing to direction. Okay, now it's using the thin side of the dab, so if you change the angle to 0, there we go. See, now I like that better. Feels really nice. Get some good painterly effects. Bringing in some weird colors there. But that's Corel for you. It's probably all the blending that's going on, but it's a really nice brush. Flat Paint. Now this one is it's kind of goes fatter as you go, as you press harder. It kind of reminds me of one of those Japanese symbols. So kind of fun to play with. If you feel like the range is too much, that thick to thin, thin to thick, head on over to size. You'll see the minimum size is quite low. If you set that higher, then it'll be more kind of uniform. Or if you can just take everything lower, it'll be smaller but more uniform. So nice brush. Next one is Grainy. This was, I found this to be basically the same as the soft glowy brush from the previous category, except that it has a grain to it. It's using one of the paper textures. So it feels really nice. And probably enjoy painting with this. Soft Blender is literally a blender. Let me just hide this so you can see. If I hide the canvas layer, you'll see that there's nothing going on over here. It's transparent, so if I press over there, nothing happens. But if I press on where there is color, you can see it smears it around. So it's a straight up blender. You don't get any color from it. It just moves things around, and it works well. It's a very good blender. You can sit and, let me just go to the right layer. It's the bane of all digital painters, being on the wrong layer. So if I wanted to get rid of this grain, for example, just soften that out nicely. Works very well. Next one is dash. This one is kind of reminds me of a marker, but it leaves almost like a dry marker kind of look. You could probably build up. Oh, I see it's a very aggressive blender as well. If I come from the outside, I can get that white color in that I just selected, but if I paint in, it's going to all turn to gray. So if you like that kind of thing, that's great. Otherwise, just remember you can always turn off blending by pumping up resaturation and dropping bleed. Smooth bristle. This one feels so good. It's very much like that Japanesey one I showed you earlier, in that it gets thicker, but it's a little more controlled, and it has a little bit of grain to it, but it feels nice to use. Bristly texture. This also feels really good, and I wouldn't say it's bristly in any sense of the word, but it does feel really good. Thick bristle. So this one's real streaky. And I can imagine if we turned on impasto, we can get it looking real painterly. See that thickness coming in there. And because it's so smeary, it actually feels like you're painting with proper oils. So really fun to play with, and if you enjoy the painterly look, then be sure to try it with impasto, paint with depth. Real fun. Next we've got swoosh, and this one, see that? You see how laggy that is? Now if we paint downwards, it doesn't lag, but if we paint sideways, there's a lag. I don't know why that is, but yeah, that would drive me crazy. So personally, this is probably not a brush I'd use. I can't understand the lag for such a simple looking brush. It's basically just, a little bit of a rough oval. I'm sure you could create a more optimized brush than that. So that one's a fail for me, and so is this one, Fantasy Clouds. I mean, it really doesn't look like, you'd have to really work to make this look like clouds. It's just too, it's got too much of a distinct pattern coming through there. I think there are much better cloud brushes than this, but yeah, it is what it is. People like different things, subjectivity and all that. And this smooth sponge, on the other hand, is a winner. I quite enjoy it. Feels nice, and there's kind of a nice painterly look to it. Probably also be really nice with impasto, but you can get some nice effects with this. Nice brush. So that's it. Yes. So those are your two brush sets. But I should mention that you aren't stuck with those brush sets. Those aren't the only fluid brushes. You can just make your own. It's quite simple. All you need to do is head on over to the fluid paint category. Let's, for example, just grab a brush, Conte, square, and tick use fluid paint. Now suddenly you have a fluid paint brush, and what makes it compatible is this enhanced cover method. If I change that to something else, for example legacy cover, you'll see that this is grayed out. I can't use it as a fluid paintbrush anymore. So if it's got enhanced cover method, you can use it as a fluid paintbrush. There are a couple of specific brushes that you can't use this tech with. I can't think of all of them, but off the top of my head, particle brushes you can't use fluid tech with, artist oils, the thick paint brushes, not the impasto that I just showed you, the ones that actually use thick paint technology, liquid ink brushes. I mean, that's kind of ironic, like fluid paint isn't compatible with liquid ink, but you know, it is what it is. But most other brushes will work, so yeah, feel free to go ahead and convert all your existing brushes to fluid paint brushes. So is fluid painting a useful technology at the end of the day? For me, absolutely yes. It improves my painting experience tremendously. But if you're a person who draws more than paints, or if you prefer the thick paint technology, or maybe your painting style favors using fully opaque brush strokes, obviously this fluid paint technology isn't going to be worth your while. And I should also mention the bug is the same as the color selection one, whereas if you tick this, you can't pan. You have to do something else first and then you can pan. So hopefully Corel Painter get on that bug and squash it. By the way, if you like this layout that I have going with the collapsible palette drawers, I do have this as a downloadable file on Gumroad. It's 100% free, so feel free to grab that. I'll put a link in the description. And if you previously downloaded it, go grab yourself a new copy because it contains a 2023 version which has the color selection panel and the fluid paint panel included. And talking of Gumroad, if you're into comic book inking, you might want to keep an eye on my channel. Maybe hit the bell icon so that you get a notification when I upload, because I'm going to be releasing an inking brush pack soon, and it's going to be free for a limited time only. But to get back to the video, other than color selection and fluid paint, there have been some performance gains as well, particularly with resizing brushes, which is good news for those of us who have older computers. For me, it's worth the upgrade for fluid paint technology alone. If you're liking what you see in this review and you want to give it a bash, maybe you don't have a previous version to upgrade from. If that's the case and you're going to make a full purchase of the software, feel free to use my affiliate link, which I'll put in the description, or my voucher code, and it'll give you a big old discount. Corel offers regional pricing, so that discount will differ based on your currency, but as I understand it, you're getting at least $100 off with my code, and I'll get some commission as well. So it's a win-win, as they say. Anyway, that wraps it up. I hope that I've reviewed this well enough so that you can better make a decision for yourself whether this fits in with your workflow and whether it's worth upgrading. Thanks for watching. Much obliged if you leave a like and subscribe. Until the next one, God bless.